The candlelight had already been arranged to flatter 3 of them when he asked the 4th to stay, and she was the one holding a soup tureen because a footman had taken ill an hour before the guests arrived. She did not put the tureen down. That was the first thing anyone noticed about Margaret Ainsley, that when a duke spoke to her across a room hung with beeswax light and forced hothouse roses, she finished setting the tureen on its trivet, squared it so the handles ran true to the table edge, and only then looked up and said, "Your Grace." 3 young women in silk had been placed along the near side of the table, like cards dealt face up. She had been placed nowhere. She had come from the kitchen passage, with her sleeves still pinned back, and she meant to return to it. "Stay," the Duke of Ware said again, and the word landed wrong in that room, because everyone in it understood staying to mean something it did not mean here. Margaret Ainsley was 24 and had been keeping other people's houses since she was 17, which is to say, since the year her father's practice failed, and he died within the 12-month of it, leaving her a name that opened no doors and a head full of the one thing he had troubled to teach her. She was plain in the way that made people trust her with keys. Her hands were good. She could look at a room and know within a shilling what it cost to run, and she had spent 3 weeks now knowing exactly what Wilderhope cost, and how badly it was being cheated, and saying nothing, because a housekeeper hired on a month's trial does not accuse the man who hired her of being robbed by the man who runs his land. "I would rather not, Your Grace," she said. "The 2nd course wants sending up, and the girl is new." "Mrs. Ainsley." He had risen. He was a tall man, gone still, the kind of stillness that reads as pride to people who have not looked closely, and almost no one looked closely at the Duke of Ware, because he had spent 6 years making certain they would not. "Sit, please. There is a thing I mean to ask, and I would rather ask it once in front of witnesses than have it whispered afterward." One of the 3 young women in silk laughed, a small bright sound meant to be shared, and found no one sharing it. Margaret did not sit, but she stopped moving toward the door, and in a room arranged around motion toward and away from a single man, stopping was its own kind of answer. "Then ask it, Your Grace," she said. "But I will hear it standing, if it is all the same to you. I am dressed for work, not for the table, and it seems a poor return on your candles to pretend otherwise." She did not know it yet, but she had just said the thing he would remember longest. He had brought the 4 of them there, under a fiction so thin the whole county could see daylight through it. His grandmother had put it about that the Duke of Ware meant at last to look at wives, and 3 families of consequence within a day's drive had sent their daughters to be looked at, and the 4th chair, everyone assumed there was a 4th candidate coming, some cousin delayed on the road, had been meant for no one at all. That the housekeeper stood in it now was an accident of a footman's fever and a soup that would not carry itself. But the Duke had been watching that housekeeper for 3 weeks from the far side of his own ruin, and the fiction his grandmother built to trap him he now saw could be bent to a use of his own. "My grandmother tells me I am to marry," he said. "She is right, though not for her reasons. This house needs a mistress who can hold it, and I have watched 3 families this month send me daughters who can hold a fan. He was not looking at the three when he said it, which was its own cruelty, though he did not mean it as one. He was looking at the plain woman with her sleeves pinned back. Mrs. Ainsley has run Wilder Hope for 3 weeks, better than it has been run in 6 years. I know what my own house costs now. I did not before she came. That is not a small thing to have learned about a man. Your Grace, Margaret said very evenly, you are embarrassing your guests, and you are embarrassing me, and only one of those troubles you as it ought. Somewhere below the salt, his grandmother made a sound that in a younger woman would have been a laugh. The old woman sat at the foot of the table, where she always sat, wrapped against a cold the room did not have, and she had not been introduced to anyone, because she did not need introducing. She was Wilder Hope in a chair. She had buried a husband and a son in that house, and had every intention of being carried out of it, feet first, with the accounts balanced. Honoria, Dowager Duchess of Ware, had watched her grandson turn to stone by degrees over 6 years, and had privately given up hope of ever seeing him turn back. She had not expected the Thor to arrive holding a tureen. He means it, the old woman said, to the table at large, in a voice like a door that wants oiling. You may none of you like it, but he means it, which is more than he has meant about anything since he was 25. Sit down, girl. When a man breaks 6 years of silence, you may at least let him finish. Margaret sat, not because she was told to, but because the old woman's voice had in it something she recognized, the flatness of a person who has stopped expecting to be listened to and is astonished each time it happens. She had heard that flatness in her own voice. So she sat at the empty place that had been meant for no one, and let the Duke of Ware make his impossible proposal in front of 3 silk-clad witnesses, and his grandmother and 2 footmen, who would have it all over the county by morning. The proposal, when it came, was not romantic, and she was grateful for that, because romance she could have refused. A marriage in name, he said. You would hold this house as its mistress-in-law, not merely in fact. You would not have to marry the next man who offered in order to eat, and you would never again stand in a doorway deciding whether to be seen. In return, I would have a house that does not rob me, and a wife my grandmother cannot go on choosing for me, and an end to this. He moved one hand at the candles, the roses, the 3 young women, the whole flattering machine of it. This. You do not know me, Margaret said. I know what you did with the linen ledger, he said. I know you found the thing in 3 weeks that I did not find in 6 years. And that was the moment the room changed, because she had told no one what she had found in the linen ledger. She had only written it down, in her own book, in her own hand, meaning to be sure before she spoke. He had been reading her book, and instead of being angry that he had, she found she was thinking, with the cold, clear part of her mind that never entirely slept. He has been watching me work, and he understood what he was looking at. I will give you my answer in the morning, she said, when there are no candles. Her one condition she gave him that same night, in the passage outside the still room, with the second course finally sent up, and the new girl finally calmed. He had followed her out, a duke following his housekeeper down a servant's passage, which the whole house would also know by morning, and he stood too tall for the low ceiling, and asked her what it would take. One thing, she said. You will not lie to me about money. Not to spare me, not to spare yourself, not to keep a thing quiet until you have decided how to say it. If this house is failing, you will tell me how and how fast. I have watched one man I loved keep the truth about money from me until the truth arrived on its own and took everything, and I buried him, and I will not do it a second time for any wage or any ring. That is the whole of my price. You may keep every other secret you have, not that one. Agreed, he said too quickly. Do not say it quickly, she said. Say it as a man who knows he is going to be tempted to break it. He was quiet a moment, the candle in the wall bracket guttered and steadied. Agreed, he said again, slower, and it cost him something to say it the second way. She could see that, and she thought that a man to whom honesty about money cost something was a man who had a reason, and she wondered what the reason was, and she did not yet know that finding out would be the undoing and the making of her. She married him 11 days later in the estate chapel with the frost still on the inside of the windows, in her second-best dress because her best was worse, with the dowager and 2 tenants and the vicar's wife for witnesses. It was not a wedding anyone would put in a book. She signed her new name in the register, in the round, clear hand her father had drilled into her. Margaret, Duchess of Ware, and looked at it a moment as at a coat cut for a larger woman, and then closed the register because the ink would smear if she did not, and there was work. From the outside nothing changed, and everything did. She was mistress of Wilderhope now in law, and she went on running it exactly as she had run it as its housekeeper, which is to say she went on entering every figure herself and trusting no total she had not made. The house she had married into was a great grey reproach of a place, 40 rooms and 11 of them shut, a park gone to thistle beyond the near lawns, a home farm that should have fed the whole establishment, and instead somehow cost money to keep. And over all of it, between the Duke and his own land, stood the man his father had trusted and he had inherited along with the debts. Mr. Josiah Kell, agent to the Wilderhope estate for 19 years, who kept the rent books. Kell was a comfortable man of perhaps 50, with a good coat and a better watch, and the settled confidence of someone who has made himself necessary. He called the new Duchess Madam, with exactly the right weight of respect, and exactly the wrong warmth, and he answered all her questions fully and at length, and told her nothing. When she asked to see the rent books, he brought them the next day, beautifully kept, every column ruled, every total carried, and she sat with them for 4 hours and could find nothing wrong. And that was the first thing that was wrong, because she had already found, in the household books, the shape of a hole, and a hole in a house has to open somewhere. You will not find it in what he shows you, the dowager said. She had taken to having Margaret read to her in the afternoons, in the small, warm parlour that was the only room in the house kept properly heated, and the reading had long since become talking. My son trusted him. My grandson trusts him because my son did, and because trusting him is easier than the alternative, which is admitting that the man who has run your land for 19 years has been running it into his own pocket. Edmund cannot afford to think it. He is holding too much else. What else is he holding? Margaret asked, the old woman looked at her a long moment. "That is his to tell you," she said. "But I will say this, and then I will say no more, because it is the sort of thing that curdles if the wrong person stirs it. 6 years ago, my grandson did a thing he believed was right, in public, before a great many people. And it was not right, and he has never been able to take it back. And he has never once tried to explain it, because explaining it would put the blame where it belongs, and the blame belongs on a man Edmund would rather protect than clear himself. He would sooner be thought proud than have his brother thought a thief. That is the whole of the man you married. Now read to me. I am cold, and my eyes are gone." Margaret read, but she was not attending to the page. She was turning the word brother over, like a coin found in the road, because there had been no brother mentioned anywhere in the house, no portrait not turned to the wall, no place laid, no name spoken, and a family that keeps that complete, a silence around a living man, is a family with a wound it has never once let air. The first of the private meetings that were not quite business happened over the rent books, because everything at first happened over the rent books. She had asked him to sit with her while she went through them a second time. And he had come, and they had sat on opposite sides of the estate room table, with a branch of candles between them, and the ledgers open. And for the first hour it was only work. Then she pushed a book across to him, and put her finger on a tenant's name, and said, "Tell me about this man. Not what he owes. What he is like." "Why?" the Duke said. "Because Mr. Kell's books tell me what every man owes, and nothing about any man, and a book that knows the money, and not the men, is a book written to be looked at, not used. Tell me about him." So he told her. And then she asked about the next name, and he told her about that one. And somewhere in the third or fourth, telling the thing between them stopped being work and became two people at a table late at night, one of them discovering that he liked being asked, and the other discovering that under the stone there was a man who knew every family on his land by name and grief, and could not for his life have told you so before a woman sat him down and made him. "You know them all," she said. "When the candles had burned down a finger's width, I grew up among them. Then why do you let a man who does not know them keep their book?" He was quiet. "Because he keeps it beautifully," he said at last, and there was something under the words that was almost a joke, almost the first joke she had heard from him. "And because I have not had the stomach, these 6 years, to look closely at anything at all." She let that sit. She did not reach for it. She had learned that reaching for a thing a proud and wounded man had only just set down was the surest way to make him snatch it back. So she only nodded and made a note in her own book, and after a while she said, "The book's beautiful. I will grant you that. I have never seen a cleaner set of columns in my life." And then, because she could not help herself, because the thing had been itching at her for a week, "It is too clean. A working rent book has a tenant 3 months behind because his wife was ill, and a shilling forgiven at Christmas, and a note in the margin that says, 'Ask again after harvest.' Mr. Kell's book has none of that. Mr. Kell's book is a fair copy. Somewhere in this house there is another one, the one he actually works from, and it is not clean at all." The Duke looked at her across the candles, as though she had said something in a language he had given up expecting to hear spoken. That was also the night of the first household turning, though it happened below stairs, and he never saw it. The new kitchen girl, the one who had wept over the second course on the night of the dinner, had broken a serving dish, one of a set, and stood in the still room passage, white to the lips, waiting to be turned off for it, because the last house had turned her off for less. Margaret found her there. She did not scold. She knelt on the cold flags in her duchess's dress, and picked up the pieces, and turned them in the candlelight, and said, "This is the Bristol ware, not the good Meissen, and there are 9 of them still whole, which is enough for any dinner this house is likely to give before Lady Day. Sweep it up, and when you carry a stack, carry 7, not 11, however grand it makes you feel to carry 11. A dish on the floor serves no one." The girl, whose name was Susan, stared at her. "You're not turning me off?" "For a Bristol dish. I would have to turn myself off for worse. Go to bed." And Susan went and told the other girls, and a small thing shifted in the underneath of the house that would matter more later than anyone standing in that passage could have known. His wound he gave her himself in the end, which the dowager had said might happen, and might be better if it did. It came out on a raw afternoon 3 weeks into the marriage, in the long gallery, where he had found her measuring the shut-up rooms for what it would cost to open them. She had a tape and a slate, and was down on her knees at a window seat, working out drafts, and he stood watching her a while. And then he said to her back, in the flat voice people use for things they have carried too long, "You asked me why I let Kell keep the book. I will tell you the rest of it, since you will find it out regardless. And I would rather you had it from me." She did not turn around. She had learned that too, that some men can only say the hard thing to a person who is not looking at them. She went on measuring. "I have a brother," he said. "Younger, Thomas. 6 years ago he came to me with a scheme. It does not matter what. Land drainage, a company, names on a paper. And he wanted my name on it, because his own was worth nothing, and mine was worth a great deal. And I gave it. I stood up at the subscription meeting in the county town, before every man of substance for 30 miles, and I said, 'This is sound. I have looked at it. Put your money in.' And they did, because a duke had said it. And it was not sound. Thomas had known it was not sound. He took what he could, and he went abroad, and left me standing in a county I had told to trust me, having ruined a dozen families who did." Now she turned. "I paid them back," he said. "Everyone. It took 4 years, and it is why 11 rooms are shut, and the park is a thistle field, and I married a woman for her competence, instead of— It is why a great many things. But you asked the wrong question before, and I let you ask it. The question is not why I let Kell rob me. The question is why I have never once, in 6 years, told a living soul that the scheme was Thomas's and not mine. And the answer is that he is my brother, and telling the truth would clear my name by blackening his. And I find I would rather be thought a fool who ruined his neighbours than be the man who told the county his own brother was a thief. So I say nothing. I have said nothing for 6 years. You are the first person I have said it to, and I have said it to your back, which tells you exactly what kind of man you have married. The gallery was very quiet. Somewhere a long way off a door closed. "You have said it to my face now," Margaret said. I turned around. He looked at her. "That was not nothing," she said. "You should know that it was not nothing, because you are a man who has taught himself that everything he does is nothing, and it is a lie, and I will not sit in a house that runs on that particular lie. You paid back 12 families over 4 years and shut half your house to do it. Whatever you are not a man who ruins his neighbors. You are a man who let himself be robbed by a brother, and is being robbed a second time by an agent because he has decided he does not deserve to look closely at his own accounts. Those are different failings than the one you have chosen to carry, and I think you carry the wrong one because it is the one that lets you off looking at Mr. Kell." He said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You are very hard. I am very tired of watching kind men decide they are worthless and let thieves keep their books," she said. "It is nearly the same speech I gave my father, and he did not live to be argued out of it. You will. Now come and hold this tape. The draft in this room is costing you £4 a winter, and I mean to know why." And he came and held the tape, a duke on his knees, at a window seat, holding the dumb end of a measuring tape, while his housekeeper wife read the gap under a sash, like a sentence in a book. And that was the second private meeting, and no plot advanced in it at all, except the only plot that mattered, which was 2 people finding out they could stand to be in a cold room together. The first of the quiet gifts appeared 2 days after the gallery. She had complained, in passing, not to him, but to Susan, that the estate room had no proper lamp, and she was ruining her eyes, doing the books by a branch of candles that guttered every time the door opened. She said it and forgot it. But the next evening, when she came to the estate room to work, there was a lamp on the table, a good Argand lamp with a clean chimney and a shade, the best lamp in the house, which she happened to know had, until yesterday, stood in the Duke's own study, where he did his reading. It was simply there. He never mentioned it. When she saw him at supper, she watched him for some sign that he wanted it noticed, some opening, and there was none. He asked her whether the flue in the shut morning room could be made to draw, as though lamps did not exist, as though the best light in his house had not walked from his desk to hers overnight of its own accord. She did not thank him. She understood by then that thanking him would be a way of making him take it back. She only moved her chair so the lamp fell over her left shoulder, the way you sit a lamp for close work, and did her columns in its steady light, and thought, "He heard me say it to a servant in a passage, which means he was listening for what I need before I have thought to ask him for it." And she was careful, very careful, not to let that thought become a warm one, because a marriage in name has no room in it for warm thoughts about lamps. The ease came on them almost by accident, on a wet Sunday, when the roads were too foul for church, and the whole great house had nothing to do but wait out the rain. She found him in the library, which was one of the few warm rooms, trying to mend the long case clock in the corner that had not run in her memory of the place. And he had the movement half out, and pins laid in a row on a cloth, and an expression of quiet mutiny, and she stood in the doorway and watched him fail at it for a while before she said, You are missing the thing that makes it go. I am aware that I am missing the thing that makes it go. I have been aware of it for some minutes. Not a part, a method. You're trying to force the train back into mesh, and it will not go by force. It never goes by force. You have to find the count and let the wheels tell you where they want to sit. And you know this because a duchess is trained in horology. I know this, she said, coming in, because my father could not afford a man to wind the office clock, and so the office clock was mine, and a thing that is yours teaches you what it wants. She took the stool beside him without being asked, which was itself a small revolution, and she looked at the row of pins and the gutted movement and said, "You have put the third wheel in upside down." "I have not." "You have. The chamfer goes down. Look at the wear on it. That side has been running against the plate for 100 years. You can see it bright, and you have put the bright side up, which means you are asking it to learn a new life at the age of 100. And clocks are like dukes. They do not." He looked at her. And then, and this was the thing she would remember, the thing she would take out and turn over on bad nights for years afterward, he laughed. Not a courtesy, a real one, surprised out of him, the laugh of a man who has not used the muscle in a long time and finds it still works. "Clocks are like dukes," he said. "Go on, then, since you are so knowledgeable. Fix my clock." "I will not fix your clock. You will fix your clock. I will tell you when you are being a fool about it, which is different and more valuable, and it is the whole basis of our marriage." She handed him the third wheel, chamfer down. "There. Now the count. There are how many leaves on that pinion? Count them. Good. And how many teeth on the wheel that drives it?" And they spent the whole of that grey afternoon over a 100-year-old clock, arguing about it, the two of them, arguing without heat and without stakes and without anyone winning, about depthing and end shake and whether the mainspring had any life left or wanted replacing. And she made him do every part of it with his own hands, and only told him when he was wrong. And he was wrong often, and said so, and they laughed at it. And at one point she reached across him to steady the movement, and their hands were on the same brass for a moment, and neither of them moved. And then the clock, which does not care about any of that, ticked. Once. Then again. Then it settled into a tick it had not made in living memory, a slow, patient sound, like a heart deciding to go on. And they both sat back and looked at it, and the Duke of Ware said, "Well?" And the Duchess of Ware said, "Well?" And outside the rain came down on 40 rooms, and 11 of them shut, and neither of them, for the length of one wet Sunday afternoon, minded any of it at all. He said after a while, watching the pendulum, "It has been quiet in this house a long time." "It has a tick now," she said. "It will be less quiet." And that was all either of them said about it. And it was enough. And the clock kept the time it had been keeping before any of them were born. The second household turning had speech in it, and it came from the last quarter she expected. Mr. Poole, the butler, had been at Wilderhope 30 years, and had greeted the new Duchess with a correctness so perfect it was its own kind of insult, the bow of a man reserving judgment, and for 3 weeks he had reserved it. He did not approve of a housekeeper made a duchess. He had said so below stairs, in the dry way of a man who believes the order of the world is a load-bearing wall. But he was also, under the correctness, a proud servant of a house he had watched decline for 6 years and could do nothing about. And one evening she found him in the plate room with the good Meissen out, counting it. And she saw that his hands were not quite steady on the count, and she understood that he was doing it because it soothed him, the way she did columns. 41, she said from the door. If you are on the dinner service, it should be 42. There is one gone. Poole straightened. Madam is mistaken. There are 41, she said. The 42nd went the night of the dinner, before I was mistress here, and it was not broken, it walked. I did not say anything at the time, because I was a month trial housekeeper, and it was not mine to say. It is mine to say now. I know which footman, and he is gone, and I did not have him prosecuted because his mother is a tenant on this land, and prosecuting him would have cost her the cottage, and one plate is a cheaper thing than a widow's roof. I tell you this, so that you will know I count too, Mr. Poole, and that I count the cost of the counting as well as the count. Now, are we going to go on being correct at one another until one of us dies? Or are you going to tell me where the key to the shut wing has got to, because it is not on the ring, and I have wanted it for a week? There was a long silence in the plate room. And then Mr. Poole, 30 years a butler, did a thing he had not planned to do, which was to reach into his own waistcoat and bring out a key on a bit of blue ribbon and set it on the baize between them. His late Grace gave it me, he said, the year he died, and said, keep this off the ring, Poole. There are things in that wing I do not want the agent walking through. I have kept it off the ring for 4 years. I did not know, madam, whether you were the agent's or the house's. I know now. He pushed it an inch toward her. The house's, madam. I beg your pardon for the 3 weeks. Do not beg my pardon, she said, taking the key. 3 weeks is exactly the right length of time to reserve judgment on a housekeeper who marries a duke. I would have reserved it longer. Thank you, Mr. Poole. And she meant the thanks, and he heard that she meant it, and something in the plate room that had been standing at attention for 3 weeks finally, quietly, stood at ease. Now, wherever you are tonight, and I hope it is somewhere with a lamp of its own, and the rain, if there is rain, on the other side of the glass. You have been very patient, sitting in that cold, grey house with me, and we are only halfway up its stairs. Will you stay a while longer and see what she does with that key? Because what she did with the key was find the other rent book. The shut wing was cold and smelled of the particular grief of rooms that are heated for no one, and most of it was Holland covers and stopped clocks and a smell of soot. But at the end of it was a small room that had been the old Duke's estate room before Kell had moved the business to the newer, warmer, more convenient office by the yard, and in it, in a press that Poole's key opened, were the old books. And among the old books, still, because Kell had had no reason to think anyone would ever come here, and no key to come here with, was the working rent book. The real one, the one with a tenant 3 months behind because his wife was ill, and a shilling forgiven at Christmas, and ask again after harvest in a margin. It was Kell's own hand, working, honest, the book a man keeps for himself, and set beside the fair copy he brought up to the house. It told her everything, because the 2 books did not agree, and the place they did not agree was where the money went. She did not confront him with it. Not yet. She spent 4 nights in the estate room, with both books, and her own household ledgers, and the argand lamp that had walked from his desk to hers. And she did the thing her father had taught her, which is that you do not accuse a man of a hole until you can say precisely how big the hole is, and precisely how he dug it. And what she found, laid side by side, was not a stolen sum, but a stolen method. Kell collected the true rents, entered the true figures in his own book, and then copied a lower figure into the fair copy for the house, forgiving on paper rents he had in fact taken in coin. And the difference, for 19 years, but ruinously for the last 6, since the disgrace, since the Duke had stopped looking, the difference had gone quietly, monthly, into the pocket of a comfortable man with a good coat and a better watch, who called her madam with exactly the wrong warmth. She was still 4 nights deep in it when the thing she had been dreading from another direction arrived. And it arrived, as these things do, at a dinner. The dowager, against all advice, including her own, had decided the marriage should be shown to the county, and had got up a dinner for it. And the county had come, curious as cats, to see the Duke who married his housekeeper. And among the county came the Marchioness of Fen and her daughter, Lady Sylvia Carr, who had been one of the 3 young women in silk at the first dinner, the one who had laughed the small bright laugh that no one shared. Sylvia Carr had spent a month absorbing the fact that a duke had looked at 4 women and chosen the one holding the soup, and she had come to dinner with the particular composure of a beautiful person who has been passed over and does not yet believe it can stand. She found Margaret alone in the withdrawing room before dinner, by design, and she was, it must be said, dazzling to look at, and frightened underneath, in a way that only another woman would have seen. "I wanted a moment with you," Sylvia said, "before the others come, to wish you joy. It is such a romantic thing, what he has done. Everyone says so. To reach down and simply lift someone, out of the kitchen, as it were. It is like a story." She smiled. "Though, of course, in the stories the girl is beautiful, isn't she? And I did wonder, one does wonder, what it will be like for you, at tables like this one, year on year, being the thing everyone knows he chose out of kindness. Because they will always know. That is the trouble with being lifted. Everyone remembers the height you were lifted from." "That is true," Margaret said. "They will always know." Sylvia had not expected agreement, and it unbalanced her. "I only mean—" "You mean to tell me that I am plain, and that he chose me the way a man chooses a good servant, and that everyone in that dining room will think so, and that I will have to sit among them knowing they think so, for the rest of my life?" Margaret set down the little dish she had been squaring on the table, the same unconscious gesture from the very first night. "You have said it very well. It is all correct. May I tell you the part you have got wrong?" She looked at the girl, not unkindly. "You are frightened. You were raised to be looked at and chosen, and you were looked at, and you were not chosen, and you have come in here to hurt me, because if you can make me small, then the choosing meant nothing, and you were not truly passed over. I know this because I have been frightened in every house I ever kept, and fear has a face, and yours is wearing it under a very great deal of powder. I am not going to hurt you back. It would be like striking a bird. But I am going to tell you one true thing. Since you came for truth, he did not lift me. I was never down. A woman who can run a house like this one was never down, whatever the county thinks it sees. Now dry your eyes before your mother comes in. Akikid, you have a quarter-hour, and Green does not take tears well. And Sylvia Carr, who had come to wound and been seen instead, right down to the fright under the powder, sat down rather suddenly on the withdrawing-room sofa, and did not, for a moment, have anything at all to say. The third of the private meetings strayed furthest of any of them, and it happened not in the estate room, but on the home farm, in the rain, over a wall. She had gone out to look at the farm, because the farm was the one part of the accounts she could not make sit still. It produced too little for its size. It always had, and she did not believe land lied. She believed men lied about land. He had come with her, because by now he came with her to most things, having discovered somewhere in the mending of the clock that he would rather be where she was than not, and they had stood together in the wet at the top of the long field, while she asked the tenant, a slow, careful old man named Harpreet Dulal, who had farmed it 40 years, why the yield was what it was. And the old man had looked at the Duke, and then at the Duchess, and decided, on some calculation of his own, to tell the truth. "Because half of it ain't sown, Your Grace," he said. "Mr. Kell has it entered as sown, and I'm charged rent as sown, but the seed corn he sends up wouldn't sow a garden, let alone the long field. And when I said so, he said the books say it's sown, and the books is what the Duke sees, so best I mind my own. Beg pardon. Your Grace did ask." She stood in the rain, and felt the last piece of it go into place. Because a hole in a rent book is one thing, but a field entered as sown and standing empty is the same lie told twice, in ink and in earth, and earth is a witness that cannot be made into a fair copy. On the walk back, wet through, she said to the Duke, "I have him. I have had him for 4 nights, and I did not tell you because I wanted the field. And now I have the field. I can show you tonight, in his own hand, exactly what Josiah Kell has taken out of this house for 6 years, and how. I need only ask you one thing first, and I need you to answer it as the man who agreed, in a cold passage, never to lie to me about money." She stopped, there in the wet lane, and made him stop. "When I lay it in front of you, his hand, the 2 books, the empty field, are you going to look at it? Or are you going to find a reason not to, the way you have found a reason not to look at anything for 6 years, because looking means acting, and acting means being a duke again, and you gave that up along with your brother?" He was quiet in the rain a long moment. His hair was flat with it, and he looked younger and less like stone than she had ever seen him. "You are asking whether I am a coward," he said. "I am asking whether you are still one," she said. "It is a different question. A man is allowed to have been one." "Show me tonight," he said. "I will look." And walking the rest of the way in the rain, cold to the bone, neither of them touching. She was aware of him beside her, with an acuteness that had nothing to do with the cold. And she thought, with the clear part of her mind, "This is the trouble. This exactly." And she named it to herself, and did not look at him, because she had 4 nights' work to lay before a man tonight, and no business at all letting her heart get into the accounts. She let herself feel the whole shape of it only once, and she chose the time and the place for it as deliberately as she chose anything, which was to say alone, at night on the back stairs, where no one went. It was the night after she had laid Kell's theft before the Duke, and he had looked at it, all of it, for 2 hours, gone white, and then very still, and said at the end only, "Thank you. Leave it with me. I will decide how it is to be done." And she had left it with him, and gone up the back stairs to her own room, and stopped halfway, on the cold turn of the stair, where the window looked out on the thistle park under a pairing of moon, because the thing had caught up with her at last, and she meant to have it out with herself before it could ambush her somewhere she could be seen. She sat down on the cold step. She was tired in the particular way of a woman who has been right about something ruinous and taken no pleasure in it. Here it is, she said to herself, plainly, the way she would have entered a figure. You are in love with him. You may as well write it down and rule a line under it. You are in love with a man who married you for your columns, and your steady hand, and your habit of not lying, and every kindness he has done you, the lamp, the clock coming out in the rain to hold your tape, is exactly the kindness a decent man does the servant who is saving his house. And you have been reading it as something else, because you are 24, and no one has ever moved a lamp for you before. That is all it is. He's grateful. Gratitude in a man like that looks very like love, because he has no other warm thing to spend. And so he spends it all on the one person who has been useful to him. He will always be kind to you. He will never once cross the line from grateful to yours, because he did not marry you to cross it, and he is a man who keeps his agreements, and the agreement was a house, not a heart. And when this is over, when Kell is gone, and the field is sown, and the 11 rooms are opened, he will settle into being fond of you, the way a man is fond of a good bailiff, and you will run his house and grow old in it, and that is more than you ever thought to have, and it will have to be enough, and it is a great deal, and it is not the thing you want, and you are not going to get the thing you want, and the sooner you enter that in the book and rule the line, the sooner you can get back to work. She sat with it. The moon moved a little on the thistles. She did not weep, or she wept very little, 1 or 2 that she wiped with the heel of her hand, as she would have blotted an error. And then she was done, because there was no profit in it, and she had never in her life been able to afford a grief she could not use. She stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She said aloud to the cold window, and the pairing of moon, and the ruined park, that was slowly, under her hands, becoming a park again. Well, it is a good house, and I saved it, and that is a thing to have done. And she went up the rest of the stairs to bed. And if the saying of it had not quite convinced her, it had at least got her up the stairs, which is what such sayings are for. The reckoning came 4 days later, and it did not come the way she had planned it, because Kell, who had not kept a comfortable position for 19 years by being slow, had seen the wind change and moved first. He went to the Dowager's dinner guests. He went, quietly, to 2 of the county magistrates, who had been ruined in the drainage scheme 6 years before, and had never quite forgiven the Duke of Ware for standing up and telling them it was sound. And he told them, in confidence, as a loyal servant sick at heart, that the new Duchess, the housekeeper, you understand, the one from the kitchens, had been at the estate books since the day she married, and that sums were missing, and that he greatly feared, she had married his master to get her hands on what remained of a fortune she had watched dwindle from below stairs. He was very good. He wept a little, and he chose his men well, because a man ruined once by a will to hope is a man primed to believe the worst of the next one, and by the time the household assembled, the county come again on a grey afternoon, ostensibly to see the opened morning room, the thing was already in the air, the way damp is in the air before you can see the rain. And Margaret walked into her own withdrawing room, and felt every eye in it decide something about her before she had said a word. The magistrate who said it aloud was a heavy, florid man named Sir Hector Vane, and he said it because Kell had spent 3 days making sure he would. Your Grace. He did not bow to her. He addressed the Duke over her head, which was its own statement. It is an awkward thing, and I'll not pretend otherwise, but there's talk, and I'd sooner air it than have it fester. Your agent, a man of 19 years' good service, has laid before me an account of moneys gone missing from this estate since your marriage. Since your marriage, Mark, and he lays it, with regret, at the door of her Grace. He says she has had the books apart since the day she wed you. He says, and here Sir Hector looked, at last, at Margaret, with the particular contempt of a frightened man given permission. He says a woman lifted from the kitchen to a coronet might well think a few £100 no more than her due, and no one below stairs the wiser. The room went very quiet. Somewhere near the window, Sylvia Carr had gone still. The Dowager's stick had stopped its small, restless tapping, and the Duke of Ware had risen half out of his chair with something terrible starting in his face, and Margaret put her hand flat on the table. Not a grand gesture, just a hand set down to square a thing true to an edge. And he saw it, and he stopped, because she had asked him once for one thing, and he understood, barely in time, that the one thing was being asked of him now, in front of everyone, that he not lie to her about money by defending her before she had defended herself, as though she could not. Mr. Kell has served this estate 19 years, Margaret said, into the quiet. Her voice was not raised. It never once, in what followed, rose. That is true. He lays the loss at my door, and says I have had the books apart since my wedding day. That is also true. I have. I would do it again. May I show you what I found in them? It will take 1/4 of an hour, and it wants no eloquence, only arithmetic, and I will use his own hand for it, so that no one need take mine. And she sent Susan, who ran, who was glad to run, for the 2 rent books and her own household ledger. And while they waited, no one in that room said anything at all, and Josiah Kell stood by the wall in his good coat with his better watch, and his face composed in exactly the right degree of sorrowful loyalty. And only a person watching very closely would have seen that he had stopped some moments ago, quite meeting anyone's eye. She laid it out on the long table, the way she would have laid out a place setting, in order, each thing where a hand would want it, the fair copy, the one Kell brought up to the house, his own working book, from the press in the cold wing, in his own unmistakable hand, her household ledger beside them. And she did not accuse. She did the thing her father taught her, which is that arithmetic accuses better than any voice, if you only let it be seen. Here is the rent for the long field, entered in the book His Grace sees, at £11, marked in part forgiven, the tenant being behind. And here is the same field, the same quarter, in Mr. Kell's own working book, the one he keeps for himself, the one that never comes up to the house, entered at £18, paid in full, in coin, on the 4th of the month. Not forgiven. Paid. The £7 difference is not lost. It was never lost. It was collected, and entered as collected, here, in his hand, and then written down as forgiven. There, in the copy meant for a duke who had stopped looking at his own books 6 years ago, and had good reason. That is one field, one quarter. I have marked 140 such entries. They come, in 6 years, to £2,311, and I can show you every one, and every one is in his hand, not mine. My hand is only here. She touched her own ledger. Totaling what his two hands could not be made to agree on. She straightened. There is a field on this estate, she said, entered as sown these 3 springs, and standing empty, because the seed corn that should have gone into it was sold, and the rent charged as though it fed a crop that was never planted. The books can be made to say it was sown. The field cannot. You may all of you walk out and look at it. Earth does not keep a fair copy. It was very quiet. And then old Harriet Dulal, the tenant of the long field, who had no business at a county dinner, and had been fetched by Susan on Margaret's written word, and stood now just inside the door, in his one good coat, twisting his hat, said in his slow, careful voice, "It's empty, Sir Hector. The long field. I farm it. I've told Mr. Kell 3 springs running at once sowing, and 3 springs running he's entered it sown, and charged me for seed I never had. I'm a tenant, and he's the agent. And who was I to be believed over?" But she believed the field. He looked at Margaret, and then at the Duke, and gathered himself for the thing that cost him. A tenant speaking against the man who set his rent, in a room full of his betters. I'll swear to it, wherever a man swears such things. I'll swear the field stood empty, and her Grace is the first soul in 6 years to ride out and ask me why. And that was the thing Kell could not answer, because you cannot cross-copy a witness, and the room turned to him, not with anger yet, but with the first cold breath of doubt, and doubt to a man whose whole position is confidence, is the crack that brings the wall. He tried. It must be said for him that he tried, because the alternative to trying was the thing now coming toward him, and no man walks into that without putting up his hands. "This is," he began, in the plausible voice, the voice of 19 years. "Your Grace, this is a housekeeper's arithmetic, got up to cover her own." But the voice, which had never once failed him in 19 years, failed him now, in the middle of the word, because he looked around the room for the faces that had always, always been on the side of the comfortable man in the good coat. And they were not there. Sir Hector was looking at the 2 books. The dowager was looking at him with the flat, terrible patience of a woman who had never trusted him, and had waited a long time to be proved right. And the tenant, the nobody, the slow old man, had said, "I'll swear to it," and meant it. Kell's voice stopped. He stood with a sentence half out of him, and no one to finish it for, and the confidence went out of him not all at once, but the way water goes out of a cracked jug from the bottom, silently, so that he was empty a moment before he knew it himself. 19 years, he said, and it was not plausible now. It was only true and pitiful. 19 years I gave this house. He said it to the room as a man produces a receipt, and the room did not take it, because a receipt for 19 years' service does not cover £2,311, and everyone there could do that particular sum. Margaret looked at him. She could have finished him. The room was hers now. It had swung to her the way a stuck door gives all at once, and she had only to say the word prosecute, or fraud, or transportation, and Sir Hector, hungry to be back on the right side of a thing, would have taken Josiah Kell out of that house in irons, and been glad to. She felt the room waiting for her to do it. She felt, distantly, that she wanted to. He had called her a thief in her own house to men who were ready to believe it, because of where she was born. "Mr. Kell," she said, "you have a sister in Bath. I found her in your book, too. You send her £18 a quarter. Regular, 6 years. The same quarters you were robbing this field. I do not think you kept much of what you took. I think you were frightened of being old and comfortable, and then not. And I think a man who has decided the world owes him a soft landing will find a way to make it owe him. And that is how it starts. Always. Not with wickedness, but with fear of the cold." She paused. "I am not going to have you prosecuted. Not for your sake. For hers, in Bath, who has done nothing, and who would starve for your quarter days. You will leave this house tonight. You will sign, before you go, an account of what was taken, so that His Grace need never wonder again whether it was his own doing. And you will go somewhere I do not have to see you, and be, if you can manage it, a smaller man than the one who came in here today, ready to hang a kitchen girl for the thing you did. That is all. That is the whole of what I want from you. Go and be less." Josiah Kell looked at her, and whatever he had expected, it had not been that, and being spared is a harder thing to hold your face against than being struck, and he did not hold it. He went to the door. At the door he stopped, and half-turned, as though 19 years wanted one more word, and found there was no word, and went out, and the great door of Wilderhope closed behind the sound of him, and did not open again on him ever. She found the low point of the whole business, as she had found its one clear grief, alone, in a different room and a later hour, with the county gone home, and the candles guttering, and the house huge and quiet around her. She was in the estate room. It was past midnight. She had the 2 rent books still open in front of her, and the argand lamp burning, and she was doing the last of it, the actual arithmetic of restitution, the working out of what the tenants were owed back now that the true figures were known. Because that was the part that came after being right, the dull, long part, and she was the only one in the house who could do it. And she was packing. Not fleeing. She was too tired for anything so dramatic. But she had a small trunk open by the wall, and had put into it, over the last hour, in the intervals of the arithmetic, the few things that were truly hers. Her father's slate, her own household books, the good pen. Because she had understood something, in the swing of that room from doubt to belief, that she had been too busy to understand at the time and could no longer avoid now that the house was quiet. The dowager found her there. The old woman did not sleep much, and had heard from her maid that the new duchess's light was still burning, and had come down the cold passages on her stick slowly to see. "You are packing," Honoria said from the door. "I am tidying. You are packing your father's slate into a trunk. I have watched people tidy for 80 years, and it does not look like that." The old woman came in and lowered herself into the chair on the other side of the lamp. "Tell me why." And Margaret, too tired to keep it, told her. "Because I saw it tonight," she said. "When Sir Hector said it, a woman lifted from the kitchen to a coronet. I watched the whole room believe it in a breath, and I understood that they will always be able to believe it in a breath whenever it suits them, because it is the plainest story, and I am the plainest woman. And Edmund will have to spend the rest of his life standing up in rooms defending a wife he took for her columns. I saved his house. I am glad I saved his house. But a house does not need saving twice. And once it is safe, he will be a duke with a duchess. The county will never quite stop whispering about, and I have been the whispered-about servant in enough houses to know that the kindest thing I can do for a man—" She stopped. She had not meant to go so near it. "The kindest thing I can do is put it right, and then take my slate and go and manage some quieter house where nobody was ever asked to choose me." He kept his agreement. He gave me a house to hold, and I held it. There was never anything in the agreement that said I had to stay and watch him be sorry he made it. "Child," the dowager said, "is that the theme of it, then? That a plain woman who saves a thing must leave before anyone can tire of her, so that she is never sent away?" She said it slowly, turning it. "You would rather go, while it is still your own choosing, than stay and find out it was only ever gratitude. Because you have been sent away from houses before, and you would sooner leave one standing than be put out of it." "Yes," Margaret said, and it was the truest thing she had said in weeks. "That is exactly it. I would rather go while it is mine to do." "Then you are as great a coward as he ever was," said the old woman, not unkindly, "and the pair of you deserve each other. And I am too old to watch two people I have grown fond of talk themselves out of the only warm thing either of them has found in 6 years. But I will not stop you. I have never once been able to stop anyone leaving. I could not stop Thomas. I will only say, since you have told me your true thing, that you have got one figure wrong in all your arithmetic, and it is the largest one, and I am too tired tonight to tell you which. Work it out. You are supposed to be good at that." And she got up with difficulty and touched Margaret once on the hair, the way you touch a child who is asleep, though she was not asleep, and went out and left her with the lamp and the trunk and the 2 books and the one wrong figure. He came and found her at dawn, which was later, a different hour, the light just greying the window, and she had not gone to bed, and had not finished packing, and had not finished the arithmetic either, having sat the last 3 hours with the pen down, looking at the trunk. "Poole says you sent for the trap to be ready at 8, the Duke said from the door. He had not slept either. She could see that. For the London Road. I did. He came in. He looked at the open trunk, and the slate in it, and the lamp still burning though it was nearly light, and he did a thing she did not expect, which was that he did not argue, and did not command, and did not, thank God, defend her again. He stood on the other side of the table, the two rent books between them where they had been between them the first night. And he was not good at this. She could see him not being good at it. A man who had not said a true thing aloud in 6 years, trying to find where they were kept. "I doubted you," he said. For a moment, in the withdrawing room. When Vane said it, before you put your hand on the table, for one moment, before I knew I was doing it, I thought, what do I truly know of her? She has had the books since the day we... And then you set your hand down, and I remembered, and I have been sick with it all night. Not that Kell lied. I always half knew Kell lied, but that for one moment in a warm room, I let a frightened fool make me doubt the one person in 6 years who never once lied to me about anything. He stopped, started again, worse. That is the thing I have to say, and I am saying it badly. Not that you should stay because you saved the house. You will think it is that. It is not that. I doubted you for a moment, and I will spend a long time being ashamed of the moment. And a man does not. That is not a thing you feel about a bailiff. That shame. I have had bailiffs. I never once. He put his hand flat on the table, on the closed rent book, the way she did, having learned it from her, without knowing he had learned it. Do not go on the London Road. I am asking. Not the Duke. I am asking. Badly. I have forgotten how the words go. Stay because I would rather doubt myself for a lifetime than spend one more morning in a house you are not in. It was not a good speech. It was broken in 3 places, and he abandoned 2 sentences in the middle, and one plain thing stood up at the end of it. And that was all, and it was enough, because she had spent her whole life among men who said money smoothly, and the truth not at all. And here was one who could not say it smoothly to save his life, and was saying it anyway. That is the wrong figure, she said, and her voice was not steady, and for once she let it not be. The one your grandmother said I had got wrong. She would not tell me which. It was that one. She looked at the trunk, and then at him. I made it gratitude in my book. I ruled a line under it, and called it gratitude, because gratitude I could survive leaving. I could not survive the other thing, so I did not enter it. She put her hand out, and closed the lid of the trunk quietly on her father's slate. Send the trap away, Edmund. I am bad at being wrong, and I have just been very wrong, and I would rather be wrong here than right on the London Road. He came round the table. He did not sweep her up, because he was not that kind of man, and she was not that kind of woman, and the room had 100 years of clocks in it that would have disapproved. He took her hand, the one that had squared the tureen, and set down beside the dish, and gone flat on the table to stop him defending her, and he held it as though it were the working book, and not the fair copy, the real one, the one a man keeps for himself. And outside the window, the grey went to gold over a park that would be sown in the spring. They opened the 11 rooms that year, not all at once, but as there was money and reason too, and the money there was because £2,300 returned to a household changes, what a household can do, though most of the first of it went back to the tenants it had been taken from. £18 and 7, and the rest entered now in one book, a true one, kept by a duchess who trusted no total she had not made. The long field was sown that spring with seed corn that arrived in the right amount, because she weighed it herself at the granary door, which no duchess in the county's memory had ever done. And old Harriet Dulall, who had a new lease at a fair rent, and his swearing never needed after all, said she stood in the chaff like a corn factor, and knew a light bushel by the heft of it, and could not have paid her a higher compliment if he had tried for a year. The dowager lived to see the morning room opened, and took her afternoon reading in it, in the good light, and told anyone who would listen that she had known the day the girl walked in with the soup, which was not quite true, but she was old, and had earned a little embroidery. Sylvia Carr married the following year, a baron with a kind face and a great deal of land, and wrote to Margaret twice a year in a hand that had lost most of its performance, and the letters were, against all expectation, the letters of a friend. And Josiah Kell went to his sister in Bath, and was smaller there, and was, by all report, not unhappy to have the weight of the good coat off him at last, and that is as much of him as anyone at Wilderhope ever thought of again. As for the two of them, the plain woman and the man who had forgotten how the words went, they did not become other people. He did not turn overnight into a man of easy warmth, and she did not stop being unable to leave a dish unsquared or a total untrusted. But the clock in the library kept its time, and the lamp stayed on her side of the estate-room table, and once a year or so, on a wet Sunday, they would take the long case movement apart on a cloth, and argue about the depthing without heat and without stakes, and the arguing was the marriage, and both of them knew it, and neither of them ever said so, because some warm things are ruined by being entered in the book, and this was one, and she of all people knew which figures to leave unwritten. Now, you have sat with me the whole way up the cold stairs of that house, and out into its sown field, and I have kept you long enough. But I will leave you the one question the Duchess left herself on the turn of the back stair, the night she got her own heart wrong. Which is the truer book, do you think? The fair copy we keep for the world to see, or the working one, blotted and forgiven and honest, that we keep for ourselves and let almost no one read? Sit with that wherever you are. And when you have an answer, or even if you never do, come back, and I will tell you another.